joining. We got everybody. Got it. Okay, I see some returning faces, and usually what we do is ask everybody in the chat box to put where you're from again. And I know some of you have done this a lot, but there are new people on, like Pamela, who's joining today for the first time. So I'm Susan Bonfield. I'm the Director of Environment for the Americas, and it's great to be here today. Your usual host, Alicia, had a work emergency, so she can't join. You can go to the next slide. So we usually start with just a brief introduction to the organization for new people who are joining, and just to share that Environment for the Americas works across the Western.
I can't hear anything.
I can't hear you.
I can't either.
Neither can I.
Oh my gosh,
And
I'm
you're
muted.
mute.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry. Okay, hang
Yeah.
on a second.
That's fine.
Wow. Yeah, let's go back. Pamela, you could hear me though.
I can now, yes.
Okay, yeah. So let me start over. Everybody put their stuff in the chat box about where they're from. And I'm Susan Bonfield. I'm the Director of Environment for the Americas. We're a nonprofit organization, and I know you're used to having Alicia here, but she is out for a work emergency today. So I'm gonna pitch in here and take book club. We started this during COVID, and it was so much fun. We decided to continue it. So really appreciate everybody who joins us, and new faces like you, Pamela, and others who have not been on. We're a nonprofit organization. We work across the Western Hemisphere, and we connect diverse people to nature and bird conservation through our research programs, outreach, and our education activities, which happen mostly through our Keystone Education Program, which is World Migratory Bird Day. So if you haven't heard about that, please go to migratorybirdday.org and learn more. And I'm excited to announce, if you haven't heard, but our conservation theme for 2024 is going to be insects. So we're really looking forward to highlighting the importance of insects to migratory birds, and how the decline in insects may also be causing concurrent declines in some bird species. Next slide.
Like the cicada outbreak that's coming to Illinois this summer.
Yeah, we're excited about that.
So
So
oh my
really
gosh, I'm terrified. I'm going to
outbreak.
have to move away for a few months. I'm
No, enjoy it. Just enjoy it.
Oh, I
Watch the
remember years
phenomenon.
ago, I had to have an umbrella to get from my house to my car.
Oh yeah, I got stories about cicadas too. It's going to be fun though. I just want to remind everybody, we are nonprofit. We appreciate your support. If you want to shop on our store, we appreciate that. And Valentine's is coming up, and Daisy has prepped some really cute gifts if you want to send them to the bird nerd lovers in your life. She's got this Choco Love chocolate, which comes from Boulder, Colorado, where we're based. It's amazing chocolate, or some of our cute little tea towels, or something else you might want to send to a friend or family member. So encourage you to shop on our shop, which you can go to at environmentamericas.org. And next one, Daisy. You can also join us as a member and get our updates and hear about some of our activities taking place, maybe where you live, or our international trips and other activities that we host. And again, if you want to write us too, you can write us at info@environmentamericas.org. And next slide. And then the next bird book club is Find More Birds by Heather Wolf. We will return to our standard time, which is 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern. We are doing our noon event today because our guest is from England. So it is in the evening for him, but we didn't want to get him up in the middle of the night.
Thank you very much.
That's all, Daisy. So thank you so much. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to move to our guest today, which is Nick Penny. And I gotta say, when I went and looked up Nick's information on the web, I was so impressed by his background and his experiences. Nick is, again, from England, and he is a musician. And you can see his instruments behind him. So he's in the perfect place. Not only does he have a Kingfisher back there, but a variety of instruments and a lot of books. So it's the perfect combination for an amazing book from someone who has some just really incredible experiences. So Nick, I'd love to just turn it over to you to tell a little bit more about yourself and and how you got into birds and then led to writing this book.
Okay, thank you very much. I might explain first of all, the kingfisher in the background is a birthday card. So that people know I like kingfishers, so they tend to send me pictures of kingfishers and things like that. Okay, well, my name's Nick Penny. I'm a musician as much as I'm anything. I've been involved all my life in things to do with sound and music. I live in England in a little town called Oundle, which is in Northamptonshire, and it's probably about 100 miles north of London and just a little bit to the west of there. It's a rural area. And the reason I came to the book really is I've been walking in the area for 4 decades now that I've lived in this area. And for the first 20 years or so, I treated it mostly as exercise, and I was enjoying it and I was aware of nature. But then I had a bit of an epiphany, maybe 20 years ago, maybe a little bit further back than that, when I heard nightingales in a local forest, local wood. And Daisy, if you could play the sound of the nightingale, that would be
Sure.
great to hear. Yeah.
Give me just a minute.
Okay.
Solo Nightingale.
Yeah, that's the one. Thank you.
That's it.
Here we go. Thing about nightingales is they do little bursts of song and then they listen. They're listening for. Okay, I think that's probably enough. Thanks, Daisy. So we're lucky to have nightingales in local woods. Now, nightingales are not rare globally. I mean, in Europe and going down into countries south of Europe. But this is about as far north as they come. They migrate from Senegal. They spend the winter in Senegal, and they come up through Europe. And not many get to England. Not many get across the Channel from France. Maybe 4,000 a year, singing males. And we have a little hotspot in this area. We have about 10 singing males, which is quite a big number up against the amount that get across the Channel. And they sing at night. They're famous for singing at night, which is when I did that recording. So there are no other birds singing. And that was the sound of a male trying to attract a female singing at night. So the females fly over at night and come down to the males. And that was such a lovely sound. And as I say, I'm a musician. I'm really interested in sounds. And that was when I first got interested in birds. I started recording the sounds of birds, became quite obsessed with it, was up most of the night waiting for the dawn in the spring. So that's the start of my being interested in birds. And then I gradually got more and more interested in what they looked like. To start with, I really only knew what they sounded like, which is quite valuable, a very valuable thing to know because you can't always see them. And really this book, Call of the Kingfisher, is about a year that I spent fairly recently watching for kingfishers, particularly on the river near where I live, 5 minutes from where I live. I do that walk every day. I'd only seen kingfishers occasionally. Now, if we talk about kingfishers, you have kingfishers in the USA. I think you have the belted kingfisher and other kingfishers down Mexico in the southern states. This is the common kingfisher. Would you be able to put that slide up, please, Daisy? Slide number 1.
Yes, sure.
And this is the bird that actually got me really looking at birds as well as listening to them. And I was on a bridge near where I live, 5 minutes from where I live, and sorry, it's 2 I want. Oh, let's stay with that one. That's the river. That's the river that I walk along. So this is a very English view. It might almost look like a constable painting or something like that, one of the traditional English view. So it's not a very big river. what I say is that you can say hello, you can shout hello to somebody across the river, but you can't really have a conversation. The walk that I do goes down the right-hand side of the river and then goes along in front of the trees in the distance and then back on the other side of those trees. It's about an hour's walk, I guess. And this is actually a summer picture. About 10 days ago, all the green that you can see that's level, all the fields, were actually covered in water. So actually floods quite decisively in the winter, but this is a summer view. So this is the setting for the walk, the river and some woods around and about within 2, 3, 4, 5 miles. Daisy, would you be able to put up the next slide? Sorry, which is the one I was looking for to begin with. Okay, so that was the river. So this is the kingfisher that I'm talking about in my book. This is called a common kingfisher. Now, you don't get these in the States, but this is a bird that actually, we're at the westerly tip of its breeding area in the UK, but it spreads right across the central part of Europe and Asia as far as Japan. It's actually a very successful bird, very beautiful. If you can see the slide, it's got this iridescent sort of blue along its back. That's what you see. You see a flash of blue if you see it going by, very, very fast, very low to the water. Orange, so it's blue and orange, which apparently is the opposite sides of the color wheel. So it's a very fashionable bird. And I don't know if you can see, but the beak has orange along the bottom of it. That means it's a female. The males and the females are identical, but the females have this orange along the bottom of the beak. The male's beak would be entirely black. Daisy, if you could put up the next slide, that would be nice. So very beautiful bird, a fish eater, and this is one with a fish in its mouth. Now you can see how big the fish is compared to the bird. Very, very strong bird. And it doesn't chase fish underwater like cormorants or other birds like that. It actually sits overlooking in a branch, usually overlooking the water. It's got fantastic eyesight and it spots a fish, homes in on it with its beak and goes in one movement and gets the fish out in one movement, out again. Very, 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 very impressive to watch. Very, very impressive bird in general. Now, I managed to see, through the year, I managed to see a pair of kingfishers on that stretch of river, and also some kingfishers about a mile's walk away, where there are some old gravel pits where the gravel has been extracted and they're filled with water. And if you could show the next slide, please, Daisy, that might be nice to see. This is a picture I got of what's called a crown of kingfishers. So that's the term for a number of kingfishers together. And here we have a male parent and 3 young kingfishers, which you can see are pretty much the same size. They stay in the nest until they're fully grown. I have to say I was amazed to get that photograph. They were 70 or 80 yards away, and I just didn't think there was any chance my camera would focus. And you could imagine when I brought the picture up on my camera, I just thought, my goodness me, that's an amazing image to have got. So I think that's maybe enough of an introduction. I can talk more about the things that I've already talked about. But basically, I think the book is about a year. I wanted to document a year very much on my own doorstep. I'm firmly of the view that there are still lots and lots of things to be seen within walking distance of my own front door. And I'm still seeing new things and hearing new things every day. It's about walking. It's about listening. It's about attending to what you see. And really, it's a celebration. I call it a love story, or love, what do I call it? A love letter to the area that I live in. So that's my introduction. And if people would like to start asking questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. That's a wonderful introduction. And I'm wondering, so definitely for the group here, please let us know if you have questions. You're welcome to come on live, or you can put it in the chat box if you don't feel comfortable. So please feel free to start letting us know if you have questions. I'll get it started, but hopefully you don't have to listen to me ask questions the whole time. Nick, I just wanted to ask, it's reminiscent of Thoreau and Walden Ponds. And was your interest in doing this regularly at all influenced by some of those other naturalists who've done the same, or was it just spontaneous on your part?
It was completely spontaneous. I actually, as I describe in the beginning of the book, I was out on New Year's Day, the first day of the year, January the 1st, and I was on this bridge 5 minutes from where I live, and I looked down and I saw a kingfisher perched. Now, with the naked eye, you're not going to see much. They're not very big, maybe 6 inches tall. They're quite small birds. So what I always say is you're looking for a few pixels of blue or orange. Very, you'll just pick up with a naked eye, you'll just pick up a tiny little glimmer of, I don't know, I guess when you're into birds, you get a sense that there's some shape that doesn't fit. And that's what I saw on the first day. And I watched it for a while. It fished and it did various things and came back to the same branch. And I don't know why, but I just thought, why don't I spend a year watching kingfishers? I see them every now and then, but I don't know a lot about them. Why don't I spend a year watching them, recording what they're doing? I didn't know whether I'd see them all year, but I hoped I would. And start reading and find out more about them. Now, the authors that you mentioned, yes, they were particularly part of the inspiration, walking and being aware in nature, and as you say, sort of dealing with quite small areas and getting the best out of them, if you like. But we have other writers here in England, particularly Gilbert White. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was an 18th century clergyman who lived in southern England, Sussex, place called Selborne. And in many ways, he was the first naturalist in the English language who started writing. And it's in the form of letters to friends of his who were scientifically minded and so on. But he was one of the first people to start to look at wildlife in the context, in the whole context. In many ways, he was the first ecologist, and he was a great inspiration. And he came up with such wonderful things, like tawny owls. We have tawny owls, and I've been to his house, which is now a museum. But if you ever come to England, please try and go if you can. Selborne, it's Gilbert White. He had a harpsichord, a keyboard instrument, ancient keyboard instrument, and he had a set of pitch pipes, which is like organ pipes that you blow, so he could tune his harpsichord. And he heard a tawny owl outside his window, and he went over to his pitch pipes and started blowing them. And he found out that tawny owls hoot in B flat, in the note B flat. And I just think that's wonderful. Somebody in the 18th century coming up with something, as unusual and quirky and eccentric as that. And blow me down, they still do. They still do hoot in B flat now. So, yeah. So there are many writers, but you're quite right. The American writers, very much an inspiration. Yeah.
Oh, great. So I want to ask the listeners here today, how many of you have seen a kingfisher, whether it's our belted kingfisher in the United States or any kingfisher elsewhere? I love this group of birds. It's just such a beautiful group. So if you could put in the chat box if you've actually seen a kingfisher before. And then Nick, Nancy is asking about the kingfisher, the common kingfisher in England, and if it's as large-headed as our belted kingfisher.
I've seen pictures of belted kingfishers. I don't think you'd notice the size of the head of the common kingfisher is quite as much. Um, as I said, it's a relatively small bird anyway, but very long beaked. You know, the beak is an enormous part of the bird. I worked it out. I was trying to explain it to children actually, how long the beak was. And I don't know if you know that thing where you hold your arm against your nose as if it was an elephant's trunk. Sorry, this is a slightly
No,
eccentric thing to say.
no, I want to see
But
this.
anyway, if you did that and you look down your arm, the beak of the kingfisher is as long as your whole arm in relation to its body. Can you
Oh,
see?
wow. I want to know that everybody out there is doing this at home. So,
Well, it worked with children. They loved that idea. You know, it's quite
that's
hard
great.
sometimes to get things like that across. Um, Interestingly, there are over 100 different sorts of kingfishers in the world. I can see somebody doing it. Lovely. There are over 100 in the world, and kookaburras, the Australian kookaburra is a kingfisher. So they
Oh,
are they are very different. They're very different in their sizes. They're not all fish eaters. Um, but they all have some things in common. They have a lot of things in common, to do with their feet, I think, is technical things to do with their disposition of their toes. But also a lot of them are um, have nests in burrows. Common kingfishers make nests. I don't know if belted kingfishers are the same. They actually excavate a burrow up to 3 feet long in the bank. It takes them a lot of time to do it. Um, and I think that could be one explanation for why the male and the female are equally dazzling to look at. Um, there may be other reasons, I don't know, but I suspect that often the female is, let's say, is more camouflaged, is because they sit on nests that are easier to see, whereas these don't have to worry about that. They're 3 feet down in the earth. Let's
yeah,
have a look at
that's
some of
so
these.
it looks like everybody's seen kingfishers, and maybe Susan Sander
Yeah.
has gotten the most, a belted, green, ringed, uh, and in Kenya, the malachite kingfisher.
Oh yes,
You.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. Because the malachite, I think, is as iridescent as the common kingfisher. And I see somebody saying the belted kingfisher burrows as
And the
well.
green. I've tried a couple
Yes, it
times to
does.
see the green kingfisher, and I've never been successful. So,
Sure.
oh, okay. And we've got Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge. And thanks for joining us. Uh, and that's the belted kingfisher that they have there. Okay, great. Yeah, it's a wonderful group of birds. Your common green kingfisher. Are there any differences in behavior or other aspects of its ecology that you think are unique or
Um,
fascinating to you?
yeah, well, I mean, lots of things about it fascinate me. Just from watching them, they're very fast flyers. I don't know, I can't compare them with other kingfishers very much, but let's just say they tend to fly very, very fast. I think up to 20 miles an hour or a little bit more. Very low to the water, so they have a very characteristic flight. Um, Gilbert White, the historical naturalist I told you about, just had one thing to say about kingfishers. Kingfishers dart along like an arrow, absolutely dead straight. Gilbert White was very good at saying things very simply and very quickly. Um, they, yeah, as I say, they nest in banks. They have up to about 6 chicks at a time. Um, there's a terrible attrition rate with kingfisher chicks. They have to learn to fish, and they find it very, very difficult. Um, it's quite heartbreaking to see them belly flopping time after time to the water. So unfortunately, it's reckoned that half the chicks don't actually last the first week. So they have very large broods. They'll have as many as 3 nests in a year. Probably the first chicks will come out in May, and the last ones may come out in September, which is quite late in the year for in our climate. Um, uh, I think the main thing is just how beautiful they are. When interestingly, their feathers, the orange feathers, apparently have a pigment in them, but blue in nature, as I gathered, in feathers doesn't actually have pigments. It's to do with the way the light refracts off the feathers. So if the light catches a kingfisher in a certain way, a common kingfisher, it's absolutely dazzling. It looks like it's lit up from inside, even though it's so tiny. If you see it on a dark, gloomy day, it's just a dark silhouette. Absolute change in depending on how much light is falling on it.
Yeah, those iridescent featherings is just incredible. They're beautiful. I don't
Yeah.
think our kingfisher has quite that. It doesn't have that kind of shiny iridescence to it. You know, it's
Sure.
a blue color, but not like yours. Yours is kind of like a bee eater too. It reminds me of a bee eater's coloring.
Yeah, they're in the same family, I
Mhm.
think. Coruciformes. I don't know quite how it's pronounced. Interestingly, we've had bee eaters come to England the last couple of years. Very unusual for them to get this far. But yeah, there are a lot of similarities, I think, between bee eaters and kingfishers, or common kingfisher anyway. Interestingly, I said it stretches right across to Japan. The kingfisher's beak is designed to enter the water with as little shock, as few shock waves to the water as possible, because obviously it's really important for it to be able to grab the fish without the fish knowing it's coming. And I don't know if people know this story, but in Japan, when they were designing the bullet train, the very, very fast train they have that goes over 200 miles an hour, they were having real problems with like mini sonic booms when it went through tunnels. And somebody on their design team was an ornithologist. And they started thinking about kingfishers and the fact that they went from air into water almost without causing any ripples or anything. And the actual nose cone of the bullet train in Japan is modeled on the design of a common kingfisher's beak.
Oh, that's
Extraordinary.
great. They should
Yeah,
have called it the Kingfisher train then.
they should.
Would have been much friendlier.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Um, yeah, yeah.
Oh, well,
So,
see, that's fun.
mhm.
So I wanna ask the participants here if we have any musicians out there. Let us know if you are musical or if you play an instrument or anything like that. I'm
Mhm.
certainly not one of those. I
Sure.
loved your description of the song in B flat or the note
Yeah,
flat. And I'm always impressed by that ability to, I don't know, connect birdsong to actual music. And
yeah,
um,
yeah.
I
Well,
wanted you to speak a little bit to your music past and how that also has
yeah,
influenced your work on this book.
sure, sure. Well, I'm a self-taught musician, but I've been involved in playing and so on since I was a teenager. The main instruments I play are the Paraguayan harp, which is the harp you can see in the background, and guitar, and an instrument called a handpan, which is a metal instrument which has a very beautiful, almost harp-like sound. Um, yeah, when I first heard nightingales, I started recording them, the sound we heard right back at the beginning of this talk. And I got a little studio and I put a recording of a nightingale on one evening. And I just picked up my harp and I started to, what should we say, daydream along with the nightingale. Just let my fingers walk along the strings, see what come out. And I suddenly thought, there's something here. There's something happening here. So I just leaned over and I pressed record on my recording machine and um, just kept playing, not thinking about what I was doing, just not trying to imitate the bird, just trying to sort of pick up on the atmosphere and the speed. One great thing about nightingales, as I said earlier on, they do a little burst and then silence. and then a little burst, then silence. They're listening really for a reply. So I could fit the music in amongst that. And some friends came round and I played it to them and they were absolutely entranced. So I thought, again, there's definitely something here. So I started playing in public. I do little talks about music and I play a little bit with it. And I started playing recordings of nightingales and just improvising very simply along with them. And I ended up doing a whole CD of recordings that I made in the woods at different times, maybe one nightingale, maybe two or three singing against each other, nightingale and a European cuckoo. And I wrote a piece to go with each of the 9 birdsong recordings. And yeah, so it's been quite a big part of my life, actually. And I'm in a tradition, actually, of, as I mentioned in the book, there was a lady called Beatrice Harrison back in 1924, 100 years ago, who was a cellist. And she was a very eminent cellist. In fact, the Elgar Cello Concerto, which is one of the most famous pieces in the cello repertoire, it was dedicated to her by the composer, and she performed it first. She was playing a concert for the BBC, and the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, on the radio, was only a few years old. It had only just started. And she was so enchanted by the idea of playing to all these millions of people that she couldn't see, or hundreds of thousands, whatever it would have been then, that she went to the director of the BBC and she said, when I play at home in my garden, which is a very rural place, nightingales sing. She used to go down to the bottom of her very large garden and play, and the nightingales used to sing along with her. She said, wouldn't it be great if we could broadcast that to the nation? And lo and behold, the Director General of the BBC, very august man called Lord Reith, agreed to this. And they were totally dependent on nightingales singing on the night they decided to do this.
Oh, no.
But it worked. It worked,
Oh,
and they
good.
carried on. It carried on as an annual tradition for many, many years. So I'm not the first. And I mean, shepherds will have been playing their pipes to, right through the past, and people have been singing with birds and so on. But it's a lovely thing to do. Although I don't have to say, people ask me, I don't tend to do it live
Mhm.
because I don't really want to stress the birds. I think it's a lovely romantic idea,
Mhm.
but and the places I could go tend to be reserves and things, nature reserves, and it doesn't seem the right thing to do. But I love playing along with recordings, and obviously then you can do it in concert situations, which you couldn't otherwise.
Yeah, it's definitely not based in biology, right? In terms of what you're actually causing when you're playing and having
Yeah,
birds come
yeah,
back at you, what the actual impact is on the birds. But there is
it,
such a great history of bird song and music, and Vivaldi and Handel and other great
yeah,
masters have
yes.
definitely been inspired by birds that they hear. So it's just always fun to think about that. And then
I
I
don't
would
know.
wonder, somebody like you who's so musical, when you hear birds, are you thinking about them in terms of music? I think a lot of birders are just thinking, oh, that's the bird that says chickadee-dee-dee. But maybe they don't think about it, oh, that's the bird that's singing in B flat?
Yeah, I don't usually put them in a key, but certainly I'm very aware of the music. Not in just in pure musical notes, but the actual shape of the sounds and the phrasing and so on.
Mhm.
Um, and interestingly, things like the European cuckoo we have here is pretty much in D minor, which is very related to B flat. So I find if I'm playing along with birds in recordings, I've often will put things in D minor and they seem to work. It seems to represent the ambience really. Interesting. Uh, and there are birds. We have a blackbird here. I think it's different from your blackbird. European blackbird has got the most beautiful sound. I heard the first one of the year today, actually,
Oh,
this
nice.
very day. Spring is really beginning to come now, and that has a lovely. It's quite a low sound. and it's just tugs at my heart. It's a simple bird, it's a common bird, it's not snazzy looking bird, but it just has this call that just I don't know what it is. It just lifts my whole spirit, really. There's other birds. There's something called a blackcap, which is another beautiful singer, and that does what at the end of every phrase, it has something which uh, could be was called like a dying fall, or yeah, it just falls away at the end in a very musical way. Um, Interesting, you were saying about composers. Um, Beethoven writes in one of his journals about hearing yellowhammers, which is a bird we have in Europe. I don't know if you have it there. And it's got a sort of a phrase that sort of goes, and not long after, he wrote da 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 da. So who knows? That could be the most famous use of a bird's call. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Finnish Symphony. That could be the most famous use of a bird's call in a piece of music. I mean,
Yeah, and your yellow hammer is quite different from what we have called, I think it's been called the yellow hammer, which ours is a flicker, which is a
right,
woodpecker, but yours is a
right.
bunting.
It's
So
absolutely a small bird, very, very, very yellow, and it's got this. It does. It's not exactly the same
yeah.
but you can hear the short notes followed by the long notes. You know,
Mhm.
it's very much
Yeah.
like that. Um, Actually, Daisy, it might be nice to play the call of the kingfisher, of the common kingfisher now, if you could just pick that up, because there's something
Sure.
interesting I'd like to say about that. So the kingfisher doesn't have a song, the common kingfisher here. It's a call, and it's
Can
very
you hear it?
simple. I'm not hearing it now. No,
Okay, sorry. So I have to share my, I don't know
you
how
have to share the sounds, don't you? I think.
the way I'm trying doesn't work. Just a second, sorry.
If we managed to get the
I don't know if anybody on here has a favorite bird song they especially like. Welcome to put it in the chat. I love the hermit thrush, which is a species here in Colorado, and it just has a beautiful flute-like sound.
yeah, yeah. The thrushes are really good singers here. We have the song thrush, and the nightingale is related. There's a thrush nightingale as well, I think. So if everybody's hearing that, that's the kingfisher's call. Okay, so that's a call they would often make in flight. Um, Sometimes it's just a single deep, and they do it about every 40 yards in flight. It's almost, I guess, a territorial thing. That is a kingfisher coming towards the nest, so it's obviously communicating with um, another bird, maybe the adult, or telling the chicks that it's coming. Now, Daisy, if you wouldn't mind playing the next one after that, which what's happened here is I've actually slowed that recording down, almost like I was slowing a tape down. So this is the processed version of that call, and it's gone down 3 octaves, so we can actually hear a lot more of the detail that's going on. Are you able to get it, Daisy?
I thought you were hearing it, sorry. It's hard for me
Right.
to tell if you hear it.
That's okay. That's why I didn't want to do it, because I thought I'd get in a tangle.
Um,
Nancy puts in here that her favorite song is Winter Wren.
Yeah,
I'm not so
lovely.
familiar with that one, Nancy. It's not as common here.
Sure. We have a robin here
Oh,
as well.
Canyon Wren's fun though. Love that
Right.
one. We've got Ruth with
Yeah.
Eastern Bluebird.
Well, I'll look those up afterwards. Actually, I'll have some fun listening to those. But if we don't manage this,
Can you hear
that's
it here?
fine. No, I
No.
can't actually.
I'm sorry,
No.
I don't know what's happening. It's not working.
Okay, that's fine. Well, we managed to get 2 out of the 3 that we
Yeah,
wanted to play.
that's pretty good.
What I did, I slowed it down. So are you able to put it in the comments so that
I can hide
people
it.
can download it, afterwards and listen to themselves? I slowed it down. It sounds almost like a whale song, very low. But what is noticeable is there are lots of little swoops and dives and lots of where it's just sounded like diddy diddy, and it's almost like a dog whistle type of sound.
Hmm.
There are lots and lots of very interesting variations in that.
Mhm.
And interestingly, I've been reading some research recently that said that birds don't necessarily listen to the whole call of, or that's not what matters to birds when they're communicating with each other. They're listening for the little tiny little details within the call, and something that sounds identical to us may actually be quite varied to a bird. Um, we don't hear anything like as much as they do, because apart from anything else, our hearing is much slower than theirs. They're actually operating on a whole different level as far as hearing lots of notes and things are concerned. So there we go.
So there are a lot of sub messages within there with all the nuances of the
Absolutely, absolutely.
calls and songs. Oh, that's fascinating. I don't think I've
Yeah,
read
yeah.
that anywhere. That's interesting.
Sure, there's somebody been researching that, and some very ingenious ways that people find of um, yeah, of checking what birds are listening to, which let's face it, is very hard to imagine.
It's like how you
We
get the gossip, huh?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One thing about kingfishers, they're not very uh, they don't flock in groups.
Mhm.
They have long territories, about 2 miles long. So within a 2 mile stretch, there will usually only be one mating pair,
Mhm.
which is one of the reasons. Although it's a relatively common bird, it's not under any danger really. Um, it's uh, uh, it's quite hard to see, because you might have to be looking at a whole 2 mile stretch of river unless you know what you're looking for. So the only time you'll generally see more than, well, normally you'll only see one common kingfisher. If it's mating time, you may see two, and you may see them with the chicks. But otherwise, they don't flock together. They're deadly rivals across um, the territories. Um, One other interesting thing, some of the research I did, I went to the Bodleian Library in Oxford, one of the great university libraries, and I looked at two things. I'll say, yeah, there was a map there, what we call the Ordnance Survey map, so a map from the 1930s of a survey that was done on 60 miles of the River Thames, which is the river that goes past Oxford and then on to London. And they mapped out where the kingfishers' nests were. All the different ornithological societies, bird groups mapped it out. And they were literally, in 60 miles, there were about 30 nests. So every 2 miles or so, every mile and a half. What's very interesting about that is that after towards the end of the 30s, there was a very difficult winter. Now, kingfishers can cope with anything, but they can't cope with ice. They have to head south, or they head towards estuaries. And they do very badly. We had a very bad winter in 1963 in England, Great Britain, and it's reckoned that 90% of kingfishers perished. So I think it was in the early 40s that they redid the survey of this 60 miles, and they found only two nests in 60 miles. But 5 or 6 years later, it was back to normal.
Mhm.
So they have these big groups of chicks, 6 chicks and so on, but they do manage to survive if they have to. They've got less problems finding territories. The other thing I looked at there, which was very interesting, I the very first BBC television film in colour that was shown was a film called The Private Life of the Kingfisher, and it was made by a couple called Ronald and Rosemary Eastman, and they were amateurs who started for filming in black and white some kingfishers near where they lived. And I don't know if people know the name Sir Peter Scott, but Peter Scott was a very important conservationist who maybe you've heard of David Attenborough. I don't know. It's a very
Probably
big.
everybody has, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. He calls Peter Scott the patron saint of conservation. and he was one of the founder members of the World Wildlife Fund. Anyway, he saw their work and recommended them to the BBC, and they were loaned some better equipment and so on. And they made this film, and I went to the Bodleian Library to see the notes that Rosemary Eastman had made for this film. And it was lovely to see these typewritten notes from the 1960s, this was. And I managed to track down her daughter, actually, who lives in the same mill building that Rosemary did. Rosemary unfortunately passed away. And while we were talking, we suddenly realized that Rosemary had written a book after doing this film. And we started doing dates on our fingers, and we realized she'd written it when she was 22. Now, I wouldn't have expected a definitive book on the kingfisher to have been written by such a young person. And she wasn't trained as a naturalist. She's got away with words, but almost every book that I read on kingfishers, there haven't been that many since, have got the DNA of her book in them. So that's really interesting, and a lovely example of a young woman naturalist. I mean, there are quite a lot around now that are quite prominent, but but right back in the 60s.
Yeah, that's one thing though that I feel I've always admired from your country, is that birding and bird watching is so integrated into so much of your life. From having the Royal Society there to having education for youth. But also I notice, always when I watch movies or any show that comes from there, birds are often a part of it. It might be a murder mystery based on a birder. But it's not uncommon that you have somebody with binoculars in a show that comes from Great Britain that, they're bird watching. you know,
Yeah, it is. It's a big thing here, isn't it?
and
You're
in the
quite right.
literature too. Yeah.
Yeah, in the literature, and interestingly, because I'm so interested in sounds, a lot of these period dramas, Jane Austen and things
Mhm.
like that. Whoever is working on the sound design
Mhm.
knows their birds.
Mhm.
So they'll be coming up on their carriage to the front of their uh, historic mansion house, and there'll be rooks,
Yeah.
the right birds on the soundtrack. There'll be obviously owls. I mean, that's the biggest cliche, isn't it, after dark?
Mhm.
But and the other day, I was watching Kenneth Branagh did a film of Midsummer Night's Dream, and throughout the film, there's chiff chaffs. Now,
Mhm.
chiff chaffs, they just got to chiff, 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 chiff. But to me, they're up really high, and it's this very high sound, and they almost seem like a Greek chorus, sort of commentating on the woodland below. So there's yeah, I think you're right. I don't know if you know the story of the RSPB. That's something I discovered when I was doing the book. It started with a group of women, well, one woman in particular, um, in the 19th century, who objected to the fashion for feathers in women's hats. Now, there was a huge fashion in the late 19th century and early 20th for feathers in women's hats, not just feathers, whole families of birds that had been stuffed, gruesome to look at. I mean, owls and kingfishers. And it was a major conservation issue among many species. And this one lady, trying to remember her name, might have been Etta Lemon. There were two or three that did it, sort of came together eventually. Sat in church one day, looking at the backs of these hats, and thought this can't be right. And she started a group, and it had to be all women because women were not allowed into the ornithologist groups at the time. And it took a lot of doing, and they worked and worked and worked at this, and eventually that became the Royal Society for Protection of Birds. So the RSPB, which is very, as you say, is very important in our culture, actually started with somebody saying, this is wrong. Women shouldn't have all these feathers in their hats. And eventually the feather trade was banned to the extent, that it was. And so that was the first conservation drive for birds, really. There's some similar things going on in the States, I think, at the same time.
Yep, and Nancy brings that up in the chat that that was actually the start of the National Audubon Society.
Isn't
So
that interesting?
yeah,
And was that women as well? Were they the
yes,
major?
it
Yeah,
was. Well,
brilliant.
I think Frank Chapman first noted
Ah,
the
yes,
issue, but I
yes,
think women took it up and
yeah, yeah,
he started the drive to stop it because it's their hats, right?
yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. Interesting enough, the women's suffrage movement was going at the same sort of time here, but there was a little bit of friction, I believe, because um, the lady in charge of the women's suffrage movement wanted women to look feminine. So
Mm.
she wanted them to have their hats on, so but that's just an interesting little
Yeah, that is
historical sideline.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's
Um, but
fascinating.
yeah, feathers and conservation, and feathers. It's interesting. I something else I mentioned in the book, and I went to some museums in Oxford, actually, the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is about anthropological artifacts, and the Ashmolean Museum, which is a little bit more upmarket than that. Well, upmarket, the artifacts to do with the richer classes, if you like. Um, there was a tradition in China of using kingfisher feathers um, in jewelry, particularly hat pins and bridle caps. Um, so absolutely beautiful to look at. But again, there was a conservation issue that people were trapping and shooting kingfishers. Um, but beautiful. The kingfishers are actually the feathers are actually laid. Apparently, they take out one strand of the feather at a time and lay them into silver wire leaf shapes and things like that. And of course,
Mm.
now we're used to all sorts of materials and colors and visual effects. But at the time, and this is going back 2,000 years, this tradition, um, they were on sort of wires, so they jiggled in the light, and it must have been something absolutely wonderful to see. Um,
Mhm.
mhm.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thanks, Susan, for clarifying the American women who were part of the call to action against the use of feathers. So Harriet
That's
Lawrence
absolutely brilliant.
Hemingway and Minna Hall. Yeah,
That's yeah,
which almost resulted in the loss of some of our birds. So
yeah. I
yeah.
think it affected birds worldwide. I was reading somewhere the other day that when the Titanic went down, the biggest um, cargo by value was feathers.
Oh,
That was the most expensive cargo
yeah,
being taken across the Atlantic. So they were very, very valuable.
they are, and they continue to be,
Yes,
very
of course,
valuable.
of
Yeah.
course. I found some
Nick, we're
kingfisher
starting.
feathers.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
I
I'm
was
sorry
going
to
to
interrupt you.
over to you.
No, I was just going to say we're starting to run out of time.
Okay.
And I wanted to encourage people who are listening in to, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or put them in the chat so I don't get the last one in. Nick, I wanted to see if you have the book in front of you.
I do.
For
Yeah.
those who haven't read it, since I came in impromptu, I don't have our copy here. But could you hold yours up and I guess
Yeah.
show some of the features because you can use the book as a resource.
Yes. Actually, the publisher had the idea, which was very clever, of because I talk about sound so much and I have a library of materials that I've recorded, and there's actually a QR code in the book. Um,
It up
and
just a
if
little bit higher. Little, there you go.
Yeah,
Thanks.
there you go. And if you click on that, you go to an online um, page which has 42 different recordings, which actually tie in with the text. So in the text at various places, there are little loudspeaker symbols, and they actually tie in with a recording.
Oh, that's,
Um, I think that's the first time that's been done, actually, as far as I know.
yeah, I
Um,
think so too.
and much cheaper than having to do a CD and
Mhm.
insert it into the cover and things. Um, yeah,
And I also wanted to share just your web page where you have
yeah,
your
yeah,
CDs up. I don't know if
yeah.
we can get those from here or
Yes. Well, a lot of the CDs have run out now, but I don't know if you know I do have a link to it on that page. Bandcamp, which is an online
Oh, okay.
resource where you can download and listen to stuff. And all of my stuff is actually on, all my birdsong recordings and everything are on there. You
Okay.
don't actually have to buy them. You can just stream them and listen to them.
Mhm.
And also photos. There's a lot of photos. Yeah, that's the Nature Diary, and a lot.
Yeah.
I think all the photos on there actually at the moment are of common kingfishers that I've actually photographed locally. I've got some nice ones actually the last couple of days, which I haven't
Oh,
put up
you
yet.
did.
But
You have some beautiful
uh,
ones. Those are
yeah,
amazing. I
I'm
just
I'm I'm
go ahead.
completely obsessed with kingfishers. I mean, people accuse
You
me
are.
of having tame ones, on a string somewhere because I could come up with so many photos. But it's
Oh,
it's one of these things where if you they're there, they're there. It's just seeing them. It's just seeing them really is the thing.
well, I
So
loved reading your bio too, and just about your music background, your ukulele work and your harp work,
sure.
working with seniors with dementia and just all, all that you do, not only through your work, learning about kingfishers, but also through your music. You just um, give a lot back to communities and people.
It's a privilege to do it. That's all I can say. I'm just lucky to have found things that I can do
Mhm.
that people enjoy. So I'm really, really
Yeah.
pleased about that.
Well, before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you one more question. I wanted to ask you, 'cause I don't see any questions in the chat box. I wanted to ask you, a whole year and more of observations along that stretch of river. Is there one incident that like stands out in your mind that you're like, oh, wow, whenever I think about that, it was this kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, there was one incident actually in particular that's, if you like, left me open mouth because I wasn't
There
expecting
you
it.
go. Yeah.
I saw I was saw through some trees. I saw a big brown bird descend into the water, the river, make a splash, and come away with quite a big fish. And I mean, the only that I thought that could have done that was an osprey, and it didn't look like an osprey. It wasn't the right shape, and it was a red kite. And I know that they feed on carrion. Red kites have been reintroduced locally. A very large bird, like a buzzard, maybe, um, very big bird. And I couldn't quite believe it. And I got home and I Googled it, and I found that they do actually, if a fish is floating on the surface or near the surface, is ill, the red kites will actually take it. But I was completely flabbergasted. I didn't know what I was seeing. I didn't really believe what I was seeing. Apart from that, I think I was just very surprised by how much more I learnt about the river and how much closer I came to feel to the wildlife. I've been walking that river for 40 years or something. As I say, 20 years ago, I got interested in the sounds and I got more involved through that. But it almost went into another dimension altogether. And I think there are still layers to go through yet. There's still further to go. But it became almost a sort of poetic thing on top of the actual wildlife and the observing wildlife. Um, it was something really really unusual to experience.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think we've learned just from others who've done what you've done, just how important those long-term observations can be to our understanding of place and conservation, and how things change over time, and what's contributing to those changes.
Yes, I think there is that, and yeah, and we've all got a place on our doorstep pretty much that maybe we're not attending to as much as we could be. It's always worth stopping and listening and trying to work out what's going on. There might be some new bit of behavior that you've not seen before. But obviously, not everybody has the time. I'm lucky at this stage in my life. I've almost become a teenager again. If I see something interesting happening, I can just stay until it stops. I can stay there all day. And often in nature, you don't very often chance upon something unusual happening, maybe a kingfisher the first day the chicks have come out of the nest. And it's just great you know, to be able to watch that and just wait until, well, until you get hungry or they stop doing what they're doing, you know.
Well, Nick, I just want to echo what everyone else is saying in the chat. Your book is delightful. Nick says, Ruth, like I'm walking along with you. Love the links. Wonderful listening. This was delightful and inspirational, and certainly makes us all want to go out and watch kingfishers or any other bird.
That's
So I
great.
just want to thank you very much for being part of this. We really appreciate your time and your beautiful work.
Thank you very much. And what do they say? Right back at you. You know, you're obviously doing beautiful work as well.
Thank you.
You know, thank you for this opportunity. Isn't it amazing? I can sit in my little room, whatever it is, 7:45 in the evening in England, and
Yeah.
talk to all of you. And
It's a wonderful way to share. It
it
has been,
is.
yeah. If we can't be in
And
person, this is good.
and as I said before, this is my first ever Zoom meeting. So,
Oh, good. You are
so
fantastic.
well, you know, I mean, yes, I must admit, I wondered quite how it would go, but
Yeah.
you've made it very easy for me. Thank you
Well,
very
it
much.
went like so fast. I was like, oh my gosh, it's almost already an hour, and I could ask you so much more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who joined today. Hope we see you again. We have a bunch more good books coming up and great authors, and we appreciate your being here today.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.